Thank you everyone for joining. Welcome to Nindram Lightning Talks. I'm Parag Katkar, your host for tonight. I'm the Senior Director of Enterprise Solutions at Enrhythm. First of all, I want to wish a Happy New Year to all of you. This year we have so many amazing lightning talks lined up. So I'm super excited. In Rhythm Lightning Talks are hosted every Thursday at 5:15 p.m. Eastern Time, and each week, one of our practice area consultants shares something that they have learned recently and which will help you learn and grow. So this week, Mike Sellitto, who is a software engineer with us, is going to talk about how to improve the efficiency of the development workflow, which will improve the quality of your work and also will give you better work-life balance. So I'm really excited for this one. Let's get it started, Mike.
All righty. Thank you, Parag. Happy birthday. And welcome, everyone. Again, my name is Mike Sellitto. I'm a software engineer here. And the title of my talk switched up last minute to save 100 hours a year, how to work faster. So I know it's a bold claim. We'll see if I can talk about that. So first, just a little bit of background about me. I am a software engineer professionally, but in my free time, I'd say my favorite thing to do is play competitive video games or esports, if any of you are familiar. And what I've learned in playing esports is that there's a lot of optimizations that these competitive gamers do when they're trying to be the best that can be carried over to software engineering, but also just working on a computer in general that I think can really help. So what do I mean by work faster and why would you want to do it? So when I say work faster, I mean there are little things that we do every day on the computer and when we're writing code or sending emails that can be done more efficiently. And I think a lot of us can kind of become complacent. We say, oh yeah, I know that there's a hotkey to do this, but I just grab my mouse and I right click it and I hit this. And I know there's a faster way, but I don't really do it. And the reason why we want to work faster is because, well, first of all, you can get more work done in the same amount of time, be more productive, or you can get your work for the day done sooner and have a better work-life balance. But also the quality of our work goes up. The less time we have to spend thinking about how to implement our solution to a problem, the more time we can spend thinking about the actual solution to that problem. So here's a little story. The reason why I kind of went down this rabbit hole of hyper optimizing my workflow is because I decided to log everything I did for a day while working using a program. And I found that I was wasting about 10.4 seconds, not about, exactly 10.4 seconds per task. And this was like averaged over all of these little things that I could have optimized. And there was 153 things in that day that I did. So 153, if we count 250 working days, that's almost 400,000 seconds a year, which is 6,630 minutes, which came out to 110 and a half wasted hours every year. So depending on the value of your time, I know that comes out to a lot for all of us. So I really do mean you can save 100 hours a year by implementing some solutions. So first, I want to talk about 3 high-level ways that anybody who uses a computer, not just software engineers, can improve their workflow efficiency. But a lot of the examples I'll be giving do apply just to software engineering. So first, I think it's important to configure your environment. That's what we'll talk about first. And by that, I mean, setting up whether you're on Windows, Mac, or Linux. There's a lot of things that you can tune to just make it so that you work a lot more quickly and smoothly. Second, I'm going to talk about hotkeys or keybinds. I'll probably be calling them keybinds for the rest of the talk. And finally, I'll touch on automation, which everybody can benefit from. So what do I mean, like I said, when I say configure your environment? I think it's important to set up ways that we can optimize just the programs that we're using or our operating system. So back to esports, gamers always like to set as low graphical settings as they can in order to optimize the number of frames per second they get when playing these games. It might not look as pretty, but the improved visibility as well as the higher performance from your computer give you a competitive edge. And I think things like that can be carried over to programming. So first, we'll talk about setting up like a frictionless workflow. I think your focus should be on the problem you're solving, not how you're implementing your solution. So if you're using a text editor, you shouldn't really have to think about how you're editing the text. You should just be able to have your keyboard be an extension of your brain, right? You should be able to let your thoughts flow freely onto the computer screen, which can be difficult if you don't set things up properly. Second, it's important to compartmentalize. I see a lot of developers when they'll share their screen with me, they have on their desktop, they might have like 4 windows open that are overlapping each other, and they're trying to click through and remember where they were. I think it can be very beneficial to set up one like virtual desktop, and I don't mean a virtual machine, just like a virtual desktop per application you use. And then you can set keybinds to switch between them. So for example, Super and 1, or Windows key if you are on Windows. Super 1 is always my terminal. Super 2 is always my web browser. Super 3 is always my text editor, and so on. And 4 is Slack. So I can be, without having to think or go down and grab my mouse and click on an icon, I can be back in whatever application I'm working on, because a lot of times we're flipping back and forth, hundreds of times a day between different applications while we're working. Another little thing is removing bloated animations. If you're on Linux, most Linux distributions don't have bloated animations, but recently I had to work on, with my client, I work on Mac. And anytime I would switch from one virtual desktop to another, there was like a 3/4 of a second slide animation that not only made me a little dizzy, but was wasting like, 3/4 of a second every time I switched applications. And if I'm doing that hundreds of times a day, it really adds up. Also, it's important to use lean software. I know we all love Visual Studio Code, but if your IDE is using, or whatever program you're using is using, half of your computer's memory, there might be a better option out there. I'd recommend Vim if you can get past the initial learning curve, which doesn't take very long. And finally, to improve visibility, I think a font size greater than or equal to 16 pixels can really help. If you're squinting to see your code, it's not really worth it. And even though you can read 12-point font, coding in 12-point font is not something I wouldn't recommend. And if you just try making the font size 16 pixels or more, you should be able to still fit almost the same amount of information on your screen, but it'll be so much easier to work. So next we're going to talk about keybinds or hotkeys. So I think coming from gaming, the default keybinds in most programs and video games are totally unoptimized. There's some good ones, specifically in Vim, that are great to use, but there are a lot of keybinds in programs that come out these days that are really hard to hit, or they're just not meant for ergonomics. So I think one rule to live by is ergonomics and then mnemonics. So when you're coming up with keybinds, it can be good to first focus on the things you use the most and bind those to keys near your pointer and index finger. And then the infrequently used keybinds, so maybe printing, you can use a mnemonic. So if I were to print, I might do Control-Shift-P, P for print. It's easier to remember, and it's one that I don't use as frequently. Next, I think you can ditch the mouse when it makes sense to, and I think it usually does I'm not one of those people who thinks that you should just throw the mouse away, but it's, there are a lot of ways to do things just using your keyboard, and taking a few minutes to learn them can really speed up your workflow. Next, consistency, okay? Using similar keybinds across applications. So one example of this is in Vim, I use J to go down a line and K to move up a line. I use the Vimium extension, which is available for all the modern web browsers, which lets me hit J to scroll down and K to scroll up. So when I switch from my text editor to my web browser, I don't have to switch my mode of thinking. I don't have to grab my mouse. I can just hit the same button and it does the same similar functionality. Also, I don't know about you guys, but the only time I ever intentionally hit the caps lock key is because I'm turning it off after I just unintentionally hit the caps lock key. So it can be useful for a lot of people to just switch what these keys do. There's ways to do this on Windows, Mac, and Linux very easily. And that's one of my, I'd say, pro tips. And finally, you should probably just use Vim. I'm going to keep recommending that until I get at least one person to switch over to using Vim. So finally, I'm just going to quickly talk about automation. So when we do want to automate a task, we first have to think, is this task worth automating? And I'd say most of the time the answer is yes, but if you want to calculate it, you just take how many times you're going to perform that task, how much time you'll save by automating it, and how long the automation will take to implement. And you can get a pretty good idea of whether or not it's worth automating from there. So if you do choose to automate, I think you can learn a scripting language. I don't have a Lua here, but I think Lua can be helpful. I've got an image for Bash, so if you learn a Bash script, or Python can be helpful. Even JavaScript can be used as a scripting language. I know a lot of us just think of it as a front end language, but if that's all you know everything you need to write some scripts. So second, it can be important I recommend hosting your .files or configuration files in a GitHub repository. So GitHub or any other remote repository, what this will do is it means if you get shipped a new device from your client or you get a new computer, you don't have to set everything back up again. You can just download all of your configuration files and set them up. And then the combination of these two things is when you're that's when you save a lot of time, is just making a script in your .files that automatically installs them. So it'll put them in the right places. And there are tutorials on this that you can find online. So that is another thing that I recommend to improve your speed. So in conclusion, I think we should all just use Vim. Now, I'm kidding. I know somebody's out there like, no, I need Visual Studio Code. I need I have it configured perfectly for TypeScript. I can never get away from it. Well, lucky for you, there's VS Code Vim, which is Vim emulation inside of Visual Studio Code. So there's no more excuses. You can use Vim right inside VSC, and you never have to go away. So it's a nice little extension you can find. But actually, I think it's important. Don't wait to start optimizing your workflow. Right, the sooner you make these changes, the more time you're going to save in the long run. And I do recommend, if you decide to change a lot of things, try to make it a short list first and tackle them one at a time, so that you can, really learn one thing and then move on to something else. Because if you totally change your environment and every single keybind on your keyboard, it might be a little overwhelming and you're less likely to stick with it, and you might just switch back, defeating the whole point. And last thing I do is once a quarter, spend like 15 minutes just going through a checklist to see if my workflow is optimized. I'll look online to see if there's anything else that has come out that might make me work a little faster. And I recommend, we all kind of do that. And it doesn't just need to be on the computer, just in general, what can we do to be more efficient? And, try to self-reflect. So I decided I was going to do some useful links, but there's so many that this slide is pointless. Instead, I just recommend later tonight, I'm going to be uploading to my website, MikeSellitto.com, a list of useful links, but they're categorized by operating system and what their function is. So any of the things that you saw in this talk so far will be there, as well as a bunch of other recommendations that I have. And that is it.